Okay, so welcome to our Tuesday night Torah class. Um, Let me open in a word of prayer. Father God, thank you for the nice weather we've been having. Thank you for working with us. Thank you for this group of people that decided they'd like to come out and look at your Torah tonight. And I'd ask that you just be with us as we go through it, and just help us to open our minds and our hearts to the things that you would have that for us to learn. And I know you're teaching each of us at our own pace about the things that are important at this time in our lives. I just thank you for your Torah. I thank you for the fact that it's been around thousands of years, if you will, and that it's still as meaningful today as it ever was. I just ask that you, again, just open it up to us and just bless our time together. In Yeshua's name, amen. Okay, so we're working our way through Numbers. The way I've got this pegged out is I think we're on Numbers 28. Last week we went through the second census. We had the results, the comparison. You know, the book of Numbers is aptly named. All the books, the Greeks, if they didn't do anything else, they gave them decent names for these books. Numbers is all about numbers, really. They took a census of all the people in Israel at the beginning of the book of Numbers, and they took one at the end of the book of Numbers. So we looked at this chart and kind of noticed what happened to the different tribes over the 40 years that this book spans. And that was kind of interesting. Then we talked about Zelophehad's daughters. The issue, anybody remember what the issue was with Zelophehad's daughters? Land, that was right. Zelophehad didn't have any, Zelophehad, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's a fun thing to say anyway. Zelophehad didn't have any sons. He only had daughters. And the daughters went to Moses and said, why is it fair that our father's inheritance just disappears because he didn't have sons? And so Moses took it to God, and God said, well, they have a point. And so they said that God told Moses that if a man only has daughters, then his daughters can inherit. And then he went to a line of succession of who inherits if a man dies without children. Yes, we're going to the rule. The rule is Zelophehad's daughters have to choose as a husband, or a husband is arranged for them within the tribe of, let's see, I forgot what tribe, Manasseh, which was a big one anyway, 52,000. They ought to be able to find a decent husband in there. So they had to have some husband from the tribe of Manasseh so that the land holding that Zelophehad had would remain in the family or in the tribe. And we'll talk about that. It comes up again. I think it's it's getting time for the last rodeo here, and Moses goes to God and says, "Well, can you please appoint for us a successor to me, so that the children of Israel won't be without a leader." And of course, we've kind of known all along, and the handwriting's been on the wall. To say nothing of the fact that we know what happens next. But Joshua appointed to succeed Moses when Moses dies. So we talked about that a little bit. So that brings us into chapter 28. Did anybody think about anything over the week that they thought might be? Yeah.
Actually, I just thought of it. When you were mentioning Zelophehad?
Whatever.
Zelophehad had no sons?
Yeah. Yeah, Zelophehad had no sons. Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting that when Judah went into captivity and Nebuchadnezzar killed the sons of whoever the last king was, but he spared the daughters because they didn't realize that daughters, if there's no sons, they can get inheritance. So he thought, by wiping out the sons, that he wiped out the line. That's why Jeremiah went back to get the daughters of, I forget forget the name, which king
I
it
forget
was.
the name too, but that's a very good point.
But
I hadn't thought
yeah,
about that.
so he wanted to make sure that those daughters were in good
Yeah.
hands. So he figured, well, he was gonna. Supposedly, from what I've read, just that. Now this is just conjecture by people that Jeremiah. It was Jeremiah. That's
Yeah.
right, Jeremiah the prophet. He's the one who took the daughters in, and supposedly they continued the line of the kings through
Yeah.
them.
That's interesting. Yeah. That story of when they killed that king of Judah. Nebuchadnezzar did that. What they did is they chopped off the heads of all four sons right in front of him. Then they burned his eyes out. Did you know that? The idea was that they say if you go blind, if they burn your eyes out, the only thing you can remember seeing was the last thing you saw. So he thought that would be a particularly horrible kind of death for. The Bible's got some gross stuff in it, boy. Yeah.
A little bit easier. On that chart you've got on the screen, is that an Excel sheet?
It's either. I doubt that is. I doubt that's Excel.
But do you have an Excel sheet with that on it?
Well, I could sure get one. Yeah. Why?
Would you send it to me?
Okay. Sure. I'll do that. Okay. So we can go ahead and move on now to chapter 28. Chapter 28 and most of 29, actually 28 and 29 both, are a review of the feast days. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about the calendar a little bit. So I don't know how much of it to read. Let's read the first, what was it? Let me put on my glasses so I can see here. 15 verses. Let's read the first 15 verses of chapter 28, and then we'll just talk about a few things that are kind of tangential. Does somebody want to read chapter 28, verses 1 through 15? Margaret says she will. Thanks for doing the microphone.
You're welcome.
All our intrepid microphone people are playing hooky.
28
Yeah, chapter 28.
Through
just
15.
Through 15, yeah.
Okay. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel, and say unto them, My offering and my bread, for my sacrifices made by fire, for a sweet savor unto me, shall you observe to offer unto me in their due season. And thou shalt say unto them, This is the offering made by fire, which you shall offer unto Yahweh, 2 lambs of the first year, without spot, day by day, for a continual offering, burnt offering. The one lamb shalt thou offer in the morning, and the other lamb shalt thou offer between the 2 evenings, and 1/10 part of an ephah of flour for a meal offering, mingled with 1/4 part of a hin of beaten oil. It is a continual burnt offering which was ordained in Mount Sinai for a sweet savor and sacrifice made by fire unto Yahweh. And the drink offering thereof shall be the 1/4 part of a hin for the one lamb. In a holy place thou shalt cause the strong wine to be poured unto Yahweh for a drink offering. And the other lamb shall thou offer at evening as the meal offering of the morning, and as the drink offering thereof. Thou shalt offer it a sacrifice made by fire of a sweet savor unto Yahweh. And on the Sabbath day, 2 lambs of the first year without spot, and 2/10 deals of flour for a meal offering mingled with oil, and the drink offering thereof. This is the burnt offering of every Sabbath, beside the continual burnt offering and his drink offering. And in the beginning of your months you shall offer a burnt offering unto Yahweh, 2 young bullocks and 1 ram, 7 lambs of the first year without spot, and 3/10 deal of flour for a meal offering mingled with oil for 1 bullock, and 2/10 deal of flour for a meal offering mingled with oil for 1 ram, and a several 10th deal of flour mingled with oil for a meal offering unto 1 lamb for a burnt offering of a sweet savor, a sacrifice made by fire unto Yahweh. And their drink offering shall be half a hin of wine unto a bullock, and a third part of a hin unto a ram, and a fourth part of a hin unto a lamb. This is the burnt offering of every month throughout the months of the year. And one kid of the goats for a sin offering unto Yahweh shall be offered beside the continual burnt offering and his drink offering.
Okay. These tend to be a little bit dragged out, but as you can probably see, we're going to go through the offerings, and it starts off with the daily offerings. How many offerings are there each day? 2, right? It's a lamb, 2 lambs, one in the morning, one in the late afternoon, early evening. And it tells how those are done. Then there's Shabbat. What's different about Shabbat? Beg your pardon? It's on Shabbat. That's one of the different things, yeah. There's 2 lambs. There's twice as many offerings. There's 2 lambs in the morning and 2 lambs in the afternoon. And then there's another one here that's not talked about very often. What's the next one up the ladder, if you will, in terms of offerings to Yahweh? It's a monthly, a new moon offering, right? Do you ever notice, by the way, that the word moon and month, kind of sound like, they actually are related, believe it or not. And so I wanted to take a little vector off here for a while, and just a short one, and talk to you about if you were God and you were wanting to impart upon your people some knowledge of yourself, and it needed to be something that they could learn and understand for, I don't know, several thousand years, and things are bound to get messed up in several thousand years. Certainly, you're going to have several generations, life is going to be kind of complicated, and you wanted them to be able to tell the times and the seasons. Where would you put your clock? In the sky, right? Because if you put it in the sky, it won't change, and theoretically, the people can't screw it up, right? It's going to be reliable. It's going to work the same all the time. Now, one of the things that occurred to me one time is that, I have a hard time knowing exactly where I am in the year if I don't have my trusty John Deere calendar on the wall or something like that. But the Hebrew calendar is designed so you don't need any John Deere calendar. You don't need any kind of calendar. All you need essentially is a stick, okay? So I thought we'd kind of go over that for a minute here. This is complicated, and it doesn't need to look like it, but let me explain it to you. First of all, when does the month start? The new moon. The new moon is the start of every month. So if we were to look at the months, these names over here are the Hebrew names, but they're not really, because they're the names that came out of Babylon. The Hebrews didn't name the months. The Hebrews actually had the first month, the second month, the third month, and they just called them that. But in Babylon, because the Babylonians did it, they gave them names. And many of these names are the names of Babylonian gods, which is kind of too bad, but that's okay. We have months and days of the week that are the names of heathen gods, so they don't have anything on us. But anyway, it says here that the first of every month starts on the new moon. So that's something, by the way, that, you can tell a new moon lots of different ways. I've gotten kind of used to it just since I've gotten aware of the calendar. I remember, again, as I was growing up, I remember seeing the calendar, and they had these little diagrams of a quarter moon, and then a black moon, and then a white moon, and and I never understood those. I didn't know what they were for. I just remembered April, June, and November, or whatever that poem is that tells you what all the days are. But if you watch the moon, if you don't have television, you go out and you watch the moon, you can see it. It's really easy, for example, anymore for me to determine about the middle of the month, about the 15th. The 15th is about the middle of the month. By the way, the period of the month is 29 and a half days, more or less. 29 and a half days is how long it takes for the moon to go from a specific point in its phase to the next point in its phase, that same point for the next time. So you go out, and lately, have you noticed how bright the full moon is? It's just been this last week. Man, you can almost read a newspaper out in the backyard. Beg your pardon? It's full tonight? Okay. And every time I notice that, I think about this because all those full moons line up here, if you will, on the 15th, more or less. Just right in here. So it's easy to tell when the first of the month is. The first of the month is on a new moon. Now, new moon is exactly the opposite of a full moon. The new moon is when you don't see it. Okay? Now, there's a lot of controversy in this movement about what constitutes the new moon. There is a tradition, if you will, that the new moon is marked by the sighting of the first sliver. And that could be, but the reason I personally have a problem with that is there are cloudy nights, right? When it's raining, you're not going to see the sliver. And secondly, by the time you see the sliver, that's the first, right? So it's already kind of a day late. So even if that is it, the first of the month really occurs by that definition the day before, And so they call that the conjunction. But it's kind of a calculated thing. By the time you see the sliver, you're already in the first day. So what we do here, we number the month by the conjunction, by the calculated time of when it's supposed to show up. But if you go 29 and a half days, more or less, then you get another new moon, and so you start the next month. Again, no John Deere calendar needed for this. You just look at the moon. So then the question comes, when do you start the year? Well, the first month is started, I wrote that down, I can hardly read it. It says the first new moon after the vernal equinox, which is usually March or April. Okay, now we get to talk about equinox and solstice, right? Equinox is equal night, so it's when the length of the day and the length of the night is the same. And you can tell that essentially with a stick. Put a stick in the ground. And the way you tell it with a stick is that see if I get this right, the sun is going to come up directly in the east, and it's going to go down directly in the west on the equinox. So on the equinox, there's two of them, right? There's the vernal or the spring equinox, and there's the fall or the autumnal equinox. And in both of those times during the year, the sun is going to rise due east and set due west. The other two things are the solstice. And the solstice, or the winter solstice, is when the day is shortest, and the summer solstice is when the day is longest. The sun is farthest north on the summer solstice and farthest south on the winter solstice. But again, you can do it with a stick. That's the only thing you need. You don't need a calendar. You can go out and tell when it is. So what you do if you want to do the Hebrew calendar is you keep track of the moons and you keep track of the sun. And whenever you get to the spring equinox, you look and you say, where's the next new moon? And as soon as you find the next new moon, that marks the first day of the first month of that year. And then you just follow along. Every time you get a new moon, you got the next month. Okay? And then finally, when you get down to the end, what you find is sometimes there's a 13th month. The reason is because you've come to a new moon before you've come to the spring equinox. So they, in the Hebrew calendar, what they'll do is they'll have their different months, and then sometimes they have Adar, and then they have Adar 2. The reason it's a leap month is what it really is. But still, you go back and you start the year again at the first new moon after the spring equinox. Every year starts at the first new moon after the spring equinox. No calendar, right? You can do it in your cave, right? So that's one of the neat things about this. And so God's calendar is built so that you can keep his feast days without anybody really telling you what to do. You can do it yourself. I think that's neat. So anyway, what we read about was the first kind of three. First feast day is the daily, or the first sacrifice, offerings is the best term. First offerings are the daily offerings. So every day, just after sunrise and before sunset, sacrifice one lamb along with its drink offering. And Shabbat, and then monthly. Go ahead. We got questions. I hoped we would.
So my first question is this something that they're doing in the tabernacle and only the priests do it? Or is this something that every family is doing?
Well, the people that are responsible for leading the worship of Yahweh are the priests.
Mm-hmm.
So you can bet they're doing it. But
Yeah.
the thing is you can do it too. I mean, it's not the priests are responsible for doing it. I mean, you could ask the same question:
If-
Is the government responsible for when we have Christmas?
No, but if the priests do it, then are the people covered not having to do it?
Yeah, and only because let's see, I don't know that anybody would complain if someone wanted to do it on their own, but hopefully they'll get
Right.
the same answers.
Here's the reason I asked the first question is the second question then becomes, hmm, how did they? Well, first of all, the Levites, from what I understand, I mean, they didn't own property or animals, so someone would have had to have brought it to them.
You mean the sacrifice?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. At what point, like Jerusalem or whatever is when they set up the tabernacle and then they have the temple, but as Israel grew and there were all these other cities, I mean, did they have temples or tabernacles in every city?
That's a good question. We'll read about that in Deuteronomy, but the truth of the matter is, God said, I want you to have one and only one place where you sacrifice to me, and that's the city on which I will put my name, and that's Jerusalem. So all sacrifices to him were done at the temple in Jerusalem.
Okay.
So he said that specifically, and I think when we get there, we'll have this discussion again, but a lot of it is because he didn't want people going out and picking nice spots and doing it on their own. He wanted it to be the responsibility of the priesthood, and he wanted it to be done in a very prescribed way. I'll put it this way, and you can choose to disagree, but he's not real comfortable with us kind of inventing things as we go along. He's very specific about what he wants, and he wants it done in a very specific way. And furthermore, he put the Levites in charge of it. So it's their responsibility.
So I'm sorry, I
That's okay.
have one last question. Okay, so based on what you said, if I was living in Capernaum or something, I would assume that in Jerusalem every day at the tabernacle, somebody is doing this daily offering. So I'm covered.
Yep.
But what am I covered for?
Okay. Are you saying what's the responsibility I have out here in the hinterlands? Is that kind of what you're
No.
saying? Okay.
Typically when there's an offering, there's the sin offering, there's the whatever. What am I getting out of this?
Okay.
As a believer.
As a believer. Well, these offerings, because they're prescribed, are for the entire nation. Okay. Now, if you have the typical one, I mean, if you have your own sin offering that you're compelled to do, or if you've made a vow, or if you want to have a Thanksgiving offering, that's over and above this. And you can go to the temple and do that, or you can present the animal. You know, the Levites there were Levites throughout the kingdom. They didn't do their own sacrifices and stuff. This is where the synagogues came from. This is where, if you can't go to Jerusalem every day or every Shabbat, which is obviously not going to be possible for most people, then you could go study the Torah in a local synagogue, and that's where that term comes from. And if you wanted to have a fellowship offering, then you would give the animal to the Levites, and the Levites would take it, or they would take the money from it. They would go to Jerusalem and offer something on your behalf, or you could go if you wanted to. Go ahead. The synagogues were not a place of sacrifice. Yeah, and I'm certain that's correct. And again, it's because God didn't want it to be multiplied all over everywhere. He wanted there to be one place where this was done. Let's get you the microphone.
So my question though is why? Why do we have to do these? I mean, why did they have to do these?
The easy answer is because he said so. Yeah, I don't. Let's talk about the reason. First of all, the the three we've covered here, not a big deal, really. I mean, a lamb in the morning and a lamb in the afternoon, and then two of them on Shabbat. And then, well, wait, I'm going to show you the grand total here in a few minutes. But lambs, I mean, I'm not saying they're not worth anything, because they are. And for people like this, they're worth quite a bit. This is what God says. This is what I want. This is the offering that these are not optional. These are offerings that are to be made. Now, to some degree, if you live out in the hinterlands, you can assume that this is all being done in Jerusalem on your behalf, and it's really not much of a bother to you. However, you still have your tithes and things you have to pay. You just don't have to go through this. Okay? But like I say, so far, we really aren't into a great deal of money here. I mean, it kind of looks like a tax, I suppose, in some sense. And it is. But the real key thing about the feast days, the feasts, these are not necessarily the important ones, because that's why I had her quit right here. We're going to get into the annual ones here next. But they serve two purposes. They call the society, they call us, the nation, to remember something that God has done for us in the past. And it also foreshadows and acts as a rehearsal for something that's going to happen in the future. And these are very unusual. I mean, all religions have feast days, but it's pretty difficult to find ones that, consciously remember something in the past, some specific event, and then also foreshadow some coming event. And that's what makes these so unusual. John?
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's because he said so, but that's the terms and conditions of the contract, the covenant.
Mm-hmm.
And if we didn't do that, and a nation comes after Israel, we can't go at them and say, "Did we not pay the tithes? Did we not do all that you asked us to do?" So what? It's not a big deal. Plus, the reality of it is, a lot of these sacrifices they don't just throw them out. They go to the Levites, who don't have any other way.
This is how they get their food.
Right.
Yeah.
That's their part of their food bill.
Yeah, that's right.
The other thing is you were talking earlier about where they do the sacrifices. The Northern Kingdom decided to do them somewhere else, in Shechem, right?
Yep.
Eventually, that led them to getting kicked out of the land.
Yep, you bet. We'll talk about that. Well, we can talk about it now if you want to. First of all, that's why everybody is, let's see, how can I put it? I don't know if I'd use the word comfortable, but at least understanding the fact that the temple doesn't exist right now, right? So there are no sacrifices to our God that are being made this way. Although there's a group of people, pretty rabid kind of people that live in Jerusalem and are, eagerly anticipating when the temple will be rebuilt and they can begin this process again. When that happens, then something along these lines will happen again. At least that's my belief. That's what it says. Now, the reason I say this is because all the rest of the stuff we're doing is just waiting for God to reinstate this. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I totally get that, God said it. I get that. But
Okay.
God's no dummy.
Mhm.
And there's always a reason.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it was you or John who said it, but I think what makes the most sense to me is that that ended up providing food
Mhm.
for the Levites.
Yep.
I never thought about it that way.
Okay, I should have said that, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. But I mean, it's like God doesn't just tell us to do something and there's not a good reason. We may not totally understand it.
Yep.
But he does.
Yeah. Well, all of this stuff, that's why Leviticus is, for me, such a difficult book, because this whole thing is difficult for us to understand.
Yeah.
But you're right. He does have reasons. And to the extent that we can kind of get our minds around it, we can begin to see what they are. And part of this is, of course, to constantly reinforce the fact that, sin leads to death, and God, and that it must be paid for. Somebody must pay the price for the sins that have been committed.
Exactly. Okay, so the real reason I grabbed the mic is because I agree with you 100%. Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. But Christ it says Christ died and shed his blood for us,
Mhm.
and that once and for all.
Mhm.
I don't know why anyone would go back to sacrificing.
Mhm. I hear you, and I struggled with that for a long time myself until I read, the latter part of the book of Ezekiel, and I thought, well, this has been over and done with. That's certainly what the church deal says, right? This has been over and done with. But the last part of Ezekiel, to me, and it's not like just one little verse or something. It's the whole cotton picking book. The last several chapters. It's all about the way the sacrifices are going to be done in the new temple, in New Jerusalem, and yeah, yeah. And I've read that and I said to myself, well, gee whiz, I can't hardly ignore that. It's not like he said that and he was wrong. I admit I can't get my mind around it, but I'm certainly becoming more comfortable with the fact that it is going to be reinstated. And that's probably going to be one of the things that causes some of the upheaval that we're bound to see in the world in the future.
Well, I think you got
Mhm.
an issue here, because what you were talking about a minute ago about the people in Israel, the Jews wanting to build another temple and begin sacrificing. Just because they build a temple doesn't mean God's going to be there,
No, that's true.
and it may be meaningless.
Hmm. Well, that's
Until
true.
His presence is there, it doesn't count.
That's true. It'll have to be done by his people in his way on his plan. Yep, I agree.
I think that it would be the New Jerusalem where it would be reinstated and not the third temple. Because if you remember the 40 years of the not turning white,
Hmm.
red in the temple with the
Yep.
scapegoat,
Yep.
because it was fulfilled in Yeshua. But I think that later it will be reinstated in his kingdom.
Hmm.
And I think that the potential building of the new temple could potentially be a spit in his face to what has already been done.
That's fine. I have no problem with that. I mean, it's not like I'm not telling you I know what's going to happen. I'm more comfortable with that.
I think a lot of what these sacrifices, especially the dailies, the monthlies, and the new moons, are a remembrance for us, or for back then, as Israel as a nation, to draw near to Yahweh
Mhm.
daily
Mhm.
and at His appointed times.
Yep. That's very good.
So, and just the fact that it's kind of like us, you have a special dinner. So Sabbath, hey, make it special.
Yeah. The term korban means exactly what you said
Yeah.
it means, to draw near.
Yeah, and the new moon, there's even more. But what I was going to say is that we take such offense when daily we eat our burgers, we eat our steaks, we eat the
Sure.
beef stew and the chicken and everything else. And there's been a slaughtering
Yeah.
that took place in order for us to eat that.
Yeah.
If we were meat eaters,
Yeah.
so
That's a good point, and we deserve to honor God by being obedient and thanking Him,
yeah.
which is what that is.
And I would suppose that this would all be, wasn't it like in Bethlehem where they raised all the sheep that were offered in the
Yep.
temple?
Yep.
And so I'm supposing that was raised from the tithes that came in from
Yeah.
the
It
12
was.
tribes
Yeah.
at the
It was
time.
quite a big deal.
Yeah.
It was not a small industry, raising sheep. Of course, New Zealanders know about that. Mhm.
So I was just thinking that, you guys keep saying, "Oh, this is for remembrance and all this stuff," which I agree.
Mhm.
But God's in control of everything. So He allowed the temple to be torn down.
Yep.
And He allowed the dispersion to
Mhm.
occur,
Mhm.
which meant that He didn't want that to continue, at least for a time.
Well, I won't quite admit to that conclusion.
Why?
Well, he explains why many places, but it's basically because they perverted things. They either were worshiping other gods along with him, or they weren't worshiping him with a clean heart. They weren't doing it right. Who was it I mentioned a minute ago that the Jerusalem's in the southern kingdom, and so when the northern kingdom split off, you know the story about how first thing Jeroboam did, he says, we can't have all these guys going to Jerusalem twice a year, 3 times a year. We'll build our own cities up here. And so he built Dan and Bethel, and then he couldn't have a conflict between dates, so he changed the dates. And then it wasn't long before they were putting other idols in there along with him, and they were doing all kinds of stuff. And so
So
the
he-
worship of Yahweh just fell by the wayside.
He was displeased.
Yes,
And,
that's why he did it.
And he said, I don't want this from you anymore.
Yep.
Because it wasn't coming from the right place.
Yep.
So they weren't doing it to remember. They must not have been doing it with the right
That's
heart.
okay. That's right. They weren't doing it. Yeah, you're right.
Whatever. So
But
I guess
I was just going to react to. It's not to say he must have wanted that. No, he didn't want that.
okay. I get what you're saying.
Okay.
All I meant was that he allowed it.
He allowed it.
That's what I meant to say.
Yep.
But at the same time, what I'm trying to say is that, God, he says I'm a jealous God and all this stuff. He does have feelings.
Mhm.
And so he chose when he let the temple go and all that stuff, he, in my opinion, said, I don't want that.
Mhm.
I don't want that from you anymore.
Mhm.
So, because it wasn't being done right.
Mhm.
But he's never instituted a place to do that again.
Nope.
And I totally agree with the gentleman over there. I don't know your name. Sorry. What is it? No, back there.
Kenny.
Kenny. I agree with Kenny that I think that the next temple is going to be the New Jerusalem that comes down. Now, I have to do some reading about that. But so, yes, you're correct. Because I think there is going to be an illegitimate temple created. So.
There may be. Yeah.
Um,
What do I know?
but it's like, why are we focusing on this when
Well, I'll tell you
God
why.
doesn't want it?
I'll tell you why we're focusing on this. It's because this is the way God has passed down his plans, his story, and the way he wants to be interacted with through the generations. And in general, it's worked pretty darn well. Because here we are, 4,000 years after the fact, looking at this stuff and able to somehow or another see what God thinks is important. And one of the things he thinks is important is that we remember each year, for example, how he led his people out of Egypt. What was involved in all of that, why he did that, all the trauma that went along with that. And not only because he did that, but because he's going to do something very similar again. Yeah. The point of doing it is to remember, and by remembering, the term moed is what these are. These are appointed times, and the term moed has along with it an idea of rehearsal. So you go through this as a rehearsal for something that's going to happen in the future. Now, it's not. Let's see. To the extent that it becomes ritualistic and you don't. You raise your kids so that I don't know why we do it, we just do it. That's wrong. He doesn't want that. That was the main reason he got upset with them. But, it's important to realize that, as you said earlier, number one, he's smart. And number two, he's got feelings. So he cares about what we're doing and the way we interact with him. And it's a never-ending thing with me when I realize that he thinks this stuff's a lot more important than I do. And I think probably most of us do, So
I just want to say that the Northern Kingdom, when they did all this and they got kicked out of the land, a good portion of that was punishment. It wasn't that, he didn't like it, but he kicked them out and dispersed them as punishment.
mm-hmm. And you talked about, I remember I've thought about this. when the southern kingdom got nuked, right? When Nebuchadnezzar basically overran the place. I can't imagine how it must have been to be, a believing Jew there and having said to yourself, my gosh, this temple has been around for hundreds of years. I see where they've got us, hemmed in, sieged, and I see that they're more numerous than us, but God won't let his temple be destroyed. He can't possibly. God's God. He's not going to do that. And he said, watch, and yeah. So who else? Kenny.
1 second.
Okay. I like discussions like this because it makes me rethink my positions too, because they're not held in concrete. Yeah. Hmm. Yes. Yeah, yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm getting, how can I put it? I don't know, sometimes I don't think it's healthy how much I realize, how dependent we are on things like supermarkets and refrigerators and grocery stores and cell phones and televisions and all this junk. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. So, yeah, and if you just start imagining life without them, it doesn't take you long, and man, you're depressed.
The Southern Kingdom too. They played the harlot worse than their sister, and I'm trying to find
Yep.
Jeremiah with
Yeah,
the
it was also
Holibah
Hosea
and
too, but yeah.
yeah, and it says that they received a cup filled to the double because they behaved worse
Yeah.
than the Southern Kingdom.
Yeah.
Or
And you could
Northern
argue-
Kingdom. Sorry.
No,
This-
that's fine.
yeah.
That's fine. John.
So I'm doing my task of watching on for chat things. There's some chatter about the equinox.
Okay.
It's not so much east and west as is it equal days and equal nights. That's their thinking.
Okay. That could be. As a matter of fact, I'm sure that's correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
And my thought was about this whole, just thinking like Ezekiel, Israel is a nation of priests and kings for the benefit of all the rest of the nations. And what they were doing then was kind of just for Israel,
Mhm.
The 12 tribes, and then the Levites were performing the functions. Well, is it possible that in Ezekiel's time, or what he's talking about, that will scale up to the whole world, where Israel itself will be as if it's a priesthood to the rest of the nations to do these things, to at least teach these things?
I think it's very possible and probably God's plan. But wait, Joe was first. Has been unusually quiet.
I think these are foreshadows or things to come.
Uh-huh.
It's a carryover from Mount Sinai when God spoke to the people of Israel.
Mhm.
So these are his conditions. These are the steps that Israel's to take
Mhm.
to get to the place where God wants them to be.
Mhm.
It's a carryover from Mount Sinai. It's a foreshadow.
Yeah.
Because you look look at the full picture, the sacrifices of these animals are a picture of Christ, Yeshua, being sacrificed.
Yes, for sure. He's got another one.
It was Ezekiel 23:30-34. I will do these things unto you because you have gone whoring after the heathen, and because you are polluted with their idols. You have walked in the way of your sister. Therefore, I will give her cup into your hand. Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, you shall drink of your sister's cup, deep and large, and you shall be laughed to scorn and in desertion. It contains much. You shall be filled with drunkenness and sorrow, and the cup of astonishment and desolation, and the cup of your sister Shimron. You shall even drink and suck it out. And there's more to it, but I'm not
Yeah.
gonna.
Yeah,
say it.
it's the main difference between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom is that God gave the northern kingdom a divorce. They've got a divorce, and he didn't the southern kingdom. So the northern kingdom lost their identity and became sown into the nations. Southern kingdom kept their identity, but both of them really missed the mark. I mean, it's kind of, if you really look at it kind of from God's perspective, man, they barely even, they didn't even make it to first base. You know, they didn't do almost all the stuff that he asked them to do. They did a few things, and I'm sure there were times when he was pleased. Boy, the vast majority of the time. That's whenever you read, God's description of himself. He calls himself patient, long-suffering. Yeah, I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of years of long-suffering. Anyway, let me move back to the feast days, for just a minute. Let's see. I think I'm pretty much what I want to do. I wanted to go over when they occur. I don't know whether it's better to read them here first. This is not the best place to get the basic foundation of the feasts. Where would you look for that? Leviticus, what? Leviticus 23. That's a nice one to remember because you can go back. They're all listed there. They're not crystal clear, but that's the best place. That's where they're first dealt with in some detail. Although, as they're coming out of Israel, in Exodus, God says, this is to be the first of months for you. It's in the springtime, and so God says that that's when he establishes this as the first of the year. Well, I might as well go through this now because it's sitting here. He says on the 10th of that month, you choose a Passover lamb, and on the evening of the 14th, you kill the Passover lamb, and you have Passover, Pesach. Then you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days, starting with Pesach. Okay, so way to remember the feast is there's 3 and 1 and 3. It's like the menorah, right? There's 3 on one side, 1 in the middle, and 3 on the other side. So it's 3 and 1 and 3. So the three, the first ones are the spring feasts, which are Pesach, Passover itself, which is one evening, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and then sometime during that week, there's going to be a regular Shabbat, a Saturday, if you will, a regular Shabbat. And the day after that regular Shabbat is something that I've always called first fruits. It's probably confusing to call it that. Rashit is what Mark likes to call it. It's it's when they celebrate the first fruits of the barley harvest. The main point, there's 2 main points about it. I guess the first main point is that it occurs on a Shabbat, on the day following a Shabbat. And the second main point is that it's within that week of Feast of Unleavened Bread. So those are the 3. Okay? It's just one day. The day after the Shabbat. Okay? Now, then you go along, after that day, after you celebrate this Feast of First Fruits or First Fruits of the Barley Harvest or Rashit, start counting the Omer. You heard us count the Omer. You count 50 days, basically. And 50 days after that day is Pentecost. Okay, yeah. Yep. The reason it's like Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is on a Thursday. It's on the 3rd Thursday of the month of November. So this is a similar kind of a thing. We know that Pesach, or that Pesach is the evening of the 14th of the month. Now, the 14th of the month can be any day of the week, right? Okay, it's the 14th of the month, and Feast of Unleavened Bread starts on the 15th and goes for 7 days. Sometime during that 7 days, there's going to be a regular Shabbat. You start counting the Omer on the day following that regular Shabbat. Yes.
I was just wondering here in 28 chapter of Numbers, verse 31, it talks about the bull, the ram,
Yep.
and the lambs, and then
Yep, but we're not there yet.
in verse 30 it says 1 male of the goat to atone for you, like it's an add-on of the bull, the ram, and the lambs.
Yes, but why don't you wait till we get there?
Getting back to this first fruits. So if the Shabbat like there fell on the 16th, that's like the second day of unleavened bread, right?
Mhm.
And then from that,
You start
that
counting
day,
the next day
then
as
you start
one.
counting the Omer?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
So you can never say that this holiday, Rashit or first fruits, occurs on some day of the, some specific. It's not on the 14th or the 18th or the 17th.
Oh,
It's on some day between the 15th and the 22nd.
so the first day is always that Shabbat or the day after. Is it the day after or that Shabbat?
It's the day after.
Oh, that's day one. Okay. So then Pentecost will always be on a Sunday.
That's the point.
Okay.
Okay.
I have this friend who was telling me something about Shavuot, right?
Shavuot, yeah.
That he was saying something about how people celebrate it on Sunday, and he said that that's not right. It could be, I didn't really know what he
Well,
was talking about, but
This particular, this is not obscure, I don't think, but it is a fact, I believe. It is a fact that most Orthodox Jews don't celebrate this way. They have, I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think they have given a specific date. The first fruits is on Nisan 17 or something. They've given it a date. But if you read it carefully in Leviticus, it talks about wait for the Shabbat, and then you count that next day is the first day you count, and you count off. You know what Shavuot means? It means sevens, seven sevens. So it's 49 days. One more day is 50. Okay, so that's when you start counting.
They're defining Shabbat as the last day of unleavened bread.
That's what they're doing? Okay.
Yeah, so it's always the day after that.
Okay.
But we're reading the Shabbat to mean the regular Shabbat.
Yes.
So you have to move it, so it varies.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure that, I would offend tons and tons of Jews doing it this way. But as I read the scriptures, it says that this is the way you should do it. And I admit to some degree I like it because of what it does to Shavuot, right? I said there's three of them there. The spring feasts, there's three of them. There's Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and First Fruits or Rashit. Then the next one is the one in the middle, right? The one that sits by itself, and that's Shavuot, which means sevens. And it's seven sevens after the Rashit, which always puts it on, as John says, the first day of the week, because it's the day following the Shabbat. Seven sevens is 49 days. The next day is going to be Shabbat. So, or Sunday. And that one sits by itself out here a little farther. That's Pentecost. And it's going to occur on some day within the same 7-day kind of a range. It's just going to be 7 weeks later. Yeah, usually in June, early June. And then you have the three fall feasts. The three fall feasts are the Day of Trumpets, which is the only one that occurs on the first of the month. Okay, the fall feast. The Day of Trumpets occurs on the first of the month, so it occurs with new moon. The 10th of that month, that's the first of Tishri. The 10th of Tishri is the Day of Atonement. And then, of course, the 15th through the 22nd is the Feast of Tabernacles. So those are the 7 feasts. And they're not that hard to remember. Yeah. You have a question or no? Do you have anything you want to say? Well, the first, again, if you go by what it says in Exodus, it says very clearly to the Israelites as they're coming out of Egypt, this will be the first of months, the first month of the year for you. And that's, this one. Over time, somewhere along the way, they've come down here 6 months later, and they've made this the first month, Tishri. But then they talk about there's the religious year and there's the civil year. And Nisan, or the first of Aviv, is the religious year, but the civil year is the first of Tishri. I don't see anything like that scripturally, but whatever. Now, the thing about these down here is they occur over basically a 3-week period, and it's all around the harvest. Right? And the one, well, we'll read here in a minute, but the Feast of Tabernacles is the big granddaddy of them all because it's a big honker party that lasts for a week. Okay, so let's go on and read some more here, and we'll see what happens as we go through the rest of this. We're on verse 16 in Numbers 28. Okay, do you have a question? If you want, we can talk about this some more if you want. I just didn't want to bore people. Yeah.
I'm too much of an accountant, and when I look at this,
Mhm.
I've always been confused about this calendar.
Been what?
I've been confused.
Okay.
Okay. They've got 29 and a half days in each month. Is
Mhm.
that what you just said?
Mhm.
You start the month when you don't see the moon.
Mhm.
How many of those 29 days do you not see the moon?
One.
Just one.
Well,
I'm
that's my
assuming.
experience. It's one.
I'm assuming there's no clouds for 40 days.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It has. There's also some associated with, you can. Mark's got a better explanation of this for I do, but the moon and the sun kind of follow each other as the moon goes through its cycle. I mean, I remember as a kid sometimes being able to look up in the sky at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and see the moon. You've done that. Why is that happening? Well, there's a reason for that, but the thing is whenever the full moon occurs, the moon is coming up just as the sun is going down. And so Mark likes to talk about it. There's like a 36-hour period there where you got light the whole time, because as the sun disappears, the full moon comes up and gives you light, and as the full moon disappears, the sun rises and gives you light. So that's the middle of the month. Now the exact opposite thing happens at the new moon. They somehow or another work so that you have a whole night of total darkness because you don't see the moon. You literally don't see the moon. And that's when the new moon occurs, is when you don't see it. Because the next night, you're going to see this sliver. And that's the first, is because you've seen the sliver, I think. Maybe the first is the day before. Yeah. And I'm not an expert on this, but I got the idea. I just need to go out and spend the time to watch it. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. So the full moon might have actually been last night. Like I say, I'm just telling you what little I know.
Now,
Yeah.
if I remember right, isn't the Day of Trumpets also known as the Hidden Day and also tied to the opening of the books?
Uh-huh.
And then it closes, the closing of the books is Day of Atonement. And then
Okay, yep.
And then a period of time after that, when you have the tabernacles, isn't that part of like a wedding celebration?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I get at. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about that in just a minute, about how those things map out. But let's go ahead, Margaret. We'll let you go, and then we'll read the rest of this stuff.
According to the Luna Solaria app, it's the 16th day. And I've been a moon watcher for many years because for many years we kept it from the visible. So the new moon, or the moon, is out there all the time. When it's starting to grow, you can see the little sliver, and you see it for just a brief, maybe 20 minutes at the most.
Okay.
At the full moon, you see it the whole night. It's out the whole night. And then when it starts waning past the 15th day, then you start seeing it for a less part of the day, and that's when you see it during the day.
Okay.
When you see it during the day up there, it's because it's already waning.
Okay. Okay.
And in following, usually it has the moon has a like an elliptical path that it goes. It goes up in the northern hemisphere. So there are times when you can't see the new moon from where you're at. If you're in the northern hemisphere, sometimes the moon is in the southern hemisphere on the new moon day, so you won't be able to see it until maybe the third day.
Okay.
So there's a lot.
A lot more goes on.
Yeah,
here than meets
and
the
I'm
eye.
sure people at the time, I mean, they didn't have television, they didn't have internet or anything, and so you went outside and you saw the moon. You kept track of the moon.
Yeah.
If you got up early in the morning, the moon was there, when it was waning, and you can see the last little crescent of the waning moon in the early morning, right before the sun comes up.
Yeah.
And like when you see the last little sliver, the next day it's going to be dark.
Yeah.
And then that dark of the moon, and then the following day would be the.
Now that's, I guess, back in those times.
Yeah.
I'll say this way, you can laugh at me. It's, what's a day here or there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're off a day, it's not that big a deal. It's always nice to try to be precise and have everything work out. But it wasn't like, if you don't get your rent payment in on the first of the month, they'll give you a late fee. I mean, they didn't do those kind of things. So, like I say, we can, how can I put it? Certainly, I wouldn't argue with anybody that my method is wrong and I'm off a day.
If you go back to Genesis and you read in Genesis 1:14,
Mhm.
and Elohim said, "Let light sources be in the expanse of the heavens to divide between the day and the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years." It doesn't say dark, it says light.
Mhm.
I mean, we tell by the light,
Mm-hmm.
not the darkness.
No, that's fine. I'll give you that. Well, and like I say,
When you see an eclipse, when there's an eclipse, there's been an eclipse, you can actually see the conjunction taking place.
Mhm. Okay.
So next time there's an eclipse, if you go out and if you have a tree and there's shadows, you can see the little crescent, and you can see it moving as the moon moves across the sun. So it just happens to be sometimes it's in the southern hemisphere and sometimes it's in the northern hemisphere because of this elliptical path that the moon takes.
Well, the other thing is, like I say, I think the most we would be off would be a day. Right? Now, it's going to be real bad if that day happens to be on the spring equinox, but be that as it may, it's not that big a deal. Certainly, it's no reason to break fellowship. Yeah.
Two things. First thing to add to what I was first saying, it's also the shofars are sounded because that day is linked to the coronation or the crowning of the king.
Okay.
And the second thing is the Hebrew word for firmament is rakia, which means solid, firm. And he also says that those heavenly bodies are inside of it.
Okay. That's much more. That's fine. Let's go back to the calendar and the text here. I probably wandered too far afield. Who wants to read? Let's go from verse 16 through verse 16, verse 28. I'm sorry, chapter 28, verse 16 through verse 11 of chapter 29.
Ooh, that's a long one.
Well, you're good at it.
And what's that? Oh, sorry. And in the first new moon on the 14th day is the Pesah of Yahweh. And on the 15th day of this new moon is a festival. For 7 days unleavened bread is eaten. On the first day is a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. And you shall bring near an offering made by fire as an ascending offering to Yahweh 2 young bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs a year old, perfect ones they are for you. And their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil, prepare with 3/10 of an ephah for a bull and 2/10 for a ram. Prepare 1/10 of an ephah for each of the 7 lambs, and 1 goat as a sin offering to make atonement for you. Prepare these besides the ascending offering of the morning, which is for a continual ascending offering. Is that the same as a burnt offering, the ascending?
Yes.
According to these, you are to prepare the food of the offering made by fire daily for 7 days as a sweet fragrance to Yahweh. It is prepared beside the continual ascending offering and its drink offering. And on the 7th day, you have a set apart gathering. You do no servile work. And on,
That's Passover.
oh, okay.
And
That's the end
and,
of,
Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is what's described
oh, yeah, the seventh day of unleavened bread, right?
there. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And on the day of the first fruits, when you bring a new grain offering to Yahweh at your festival of Shavuot, you have a set apart gathering. You do no servile work. You shall bring near an ascending offering as a sweet fragrance to Yahweh 2 young bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs a year old, with their grain offerings of fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for each bull, 2/10 for the 1 ram, 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs, 1 male goat to make atonement for you. Perfect ones they are for you. Prepare them with their drink offerings, besides the continual ascending offering with its grain offering. And in the 7th new moon, on the first day of the new moon, you have a set apart gathering. You do no servile work. It is Yom Teruah for you. And you shall prepare an ascending offering as a sweet fragrance to Yahweh 1 young bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for the bull, 2/10 for the ram, 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs, and 1 male goat as a sin offering to make atonement for you, besides the ascending offering with its grain offering for the new moon, the continual ascending offering with its grain offering and their drink offerings, according to their right ruling, as a sweet fragrance, an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And on the 10th day of this 7th new moon, you have a set apart gathering, and you shall afflict your beings, you do no work. And you shall bring near an ascending offering to Yahweh, a sweet fragrance, 1 young bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs, a year old, perfect ones they are for you, and their grain offerings, fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for the bull, 2/10 for the 1 ram, 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs, 1 male goat as a sin offering, besides the sin offering for atonement, the continual ascending offering with its grain offering and their drink offerings.
Okay, that's enough for now. Well, that gets you all the way up to here, all right? Because the last one you read about was the Day of Atonement. That's the 3rd one in the fall feast, or 2nd one in the fall feasts, right? Okay, Joe. Now you can talk about this stuff.
Okay, there's 2 offerings. There's the burnt offering or fire offering, then there's the sin offering.
Well,
What's
there's more than 2, but there are at
okay?
least
That's
those
what
2.
But what's the difference between the 2?
Well, the burnt offering is an offering that is completely consumed by fire. And it is a special form, the ascending offering. It's the, not mistaken, it's the very first one that's offered. But Olah offering. Yeah, yes. And the sin offering is a required offering that you're required to make to atone for sin. So they're different.
Okay, another question is the burnt offering or the fire offering for one individual, where the other offerings are for the nation of Israel.
That's a good point. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we need to keep in mind here is this is stuff that the Levites do in Jerusalem. Okay, this is not what you do at home, right? Because they didn't talk about the fact that for Pesach, you're supposed to have a lamb with your house, and if your house is too small to eat a lamb, you can invite your neighbors over. This is not instructions on how you should celebrate Passover. This is what the Levites are going to do in Jerusalem for Passover. Okay, so the point is, and I said that once, is this is not the place to go to get the definition of these. The place to go to get the definition is back in Leviticus. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about the calendar a little bit and to go over at least this part. Anything else? Any questions about trumpets and atonement? You notice that all the feasts so far up to atonement, you had meat, right? The one of the things that happens with a lot of these sacrifices, as I forgot to point out, that this is the way the Levites get their food, and God views it as sharing a meal. And then also, these are the required ones. This is there. You can have fellowship offerings and other kinds of offerings if you choose to. Okay. Finally, the reason I put this off to last is because this is a booger here. Somebody want to read from verse 12 to the end of the chapter? Verse 12. Chapter 29, from verse 12 to the end. I'll read it if you want. What's the matter? Are you confused? Well, we read trumpets, atonement, and trumpets in the Day of Atonement. We didn't read the Day of Tabernacles. Yeah, if you want to read it. It's, like I say, I think it's a long, difficult thing.
And on the 15th day of the 7th month, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do servile work, and you shall keep a feast unto Jehovah 7 days. And you shall offer a burnt offering, a sacrifice made by fire of a sweet savor unto Jehovah, 13 young bullocks, 2 rams, 14 lambs of the first year. They shall be without blemish. And their meat offering shall be of flour mingled with oil, 3/10 deals, unto every bullock of the 13th bullocks, 2/10 deals, and to each ram of the 2 rams, and a several tenth deal to each lamb of the 14 lambs. 16. And 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering, beside the continual burnt offerings, his meat offering and his drink offering. And on the 2nd day you shall offer 12 young bullocks, 2 rams, 14 lambs of the first year without spot. And their meat offering and their drink offering for the bullocks, for the rams, and for the lambs shall be according to the numbers after their manner. And 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering, beside the continual burnt offering and the meat offering thereof, and their drink offerings. Verse 20. And on the 3rd day, 11 bullocks, 2 rams, 14 lambs of the first year without blemish, and their meat offering and their drink offerings for the bullocks, for the rams, and for the lambs shall be according to the number after the manner. And 1 goat for his sin offering, beside the continual burnt offering, and his meat offering, and his drink offering. Verse 23. And on the 4th day, 10 bullocks, 2 rams, 14 lambs of the first year, without blemish. Their meat offering and their drink offerings for the bullocks, for the rams, and for the lambs shall be according to their number after their manner. And 1 kid of the goats for his sin offering, beside the continually burnt offering, his meat offering, and his drink offering. Verse 26. And on the 5th day, 9 bullocks, 2 rams, 14 lambs of the first year without spot, and their meat offering and their drink offerings for the bullocks, for the rams, for the lambs, shall be according to their number after the manner. And 1 goat for a sin offering, beside the continual burnt offering, and his meat offering, and his drink offering. Verse 29. And on the 6th day, 8 bullocks, 2 rams, 14 lambs of the first year without blemish, and their meat offering and their drink offerings for the bullocks, for the rams, and for the lambs, shall be according to their number after the manner. And 1 goat for a sin offering, beside the continual burnt offering, his meat offering, and his drink offering. Verse 32. And on the 7th day, 7 bullocks, 2 rams, and 14 lambs, the first year without blemish, and their meat offering and their drink offerings for the bullocks, for the rams, for the lambs, shall be according to their number after the manner. And 1 goat for a sin offering, beside the continually burnt offering, his meat offering, and his drink offering. Verse 35. And on the 8th day you shall have a solemn assembly. You shall do no servile work therein, but you shall offer a burnt offering, a sacrifice made by fire, of a sweet savor unto Jehovah, 1 bullock, 1 ram, 7 lambs of the first year without blemish. Their meat offering and their drink offerings for the bullock, for the ram, and for the lambs shall be according to the number after the manner. And 1 goat for a sin offering, beside the continual burnt offering, and his meat offering, and his drink offering. These things you shall do unto Jehovah in the set feast, beside your vows and your freewill offerings, for your burnt offerings, and for your meat offerings, and for your drink offerings, and for your peace offerings. And Moses told the children of Israel according to all that Jehovah commanded Moses.
That's a difficult passage because, like, on the 12th day of Christmas almost. Yeah. It's well, in order to kind of get a handle on this, I tabulated it. So these are the feasts that you have to, that these are the sacrifices that are made according to these two chapters. We have these daily sacrifices, 365 days, where we offer um, two lambs on each day, so that comes out to 730. And then there's 1,460 liters of grain and 730 liters of drink, wine, if you will. Then on Shabbat, we add 104 more lambs because there's 52 Shabbats in the year, more or less, and a bunch more grain and a bunch more wine. Then there's 12 new moons. So there you have 12 rams, 84 lambs, and a bunch of grain and wine. And then for Pesach, it's only one holiday, but you use 14 bulls, 7 rams, 49 lambs, and a bunch of grain and wine. And then Shavuot, you use 2 bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs, etc. Yom Teruah is 1 bull and 1 ram and 7 lambs. And I got the goats showing up over here too, finally. But Sukkot's the biggie, right? Sukkot, you go 13 bulls, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, and 7. Last day, the 8th day, you do 1. And then you do 2 rams each of those days, except the 8th day. 14 lambs each of those days, except the 8th day. You do a bunch of grain and a bunch of wine and a goat on each of those days. So at the end of a year, what the Levites have done is they've done 113 bulls, 37 rams, 1,093 lambs, 3,218 liters of grain, 1,361 liters of wine, and 26 goats. I just had to do that. The numbers said do that. Yes, let's see. You want a microphone guy? We got Kenny and the, okay. That's all right.
Just a quick question. Was it Yom Kippur where they did the goat that was slain and then they let the one in the
Yep.
wilderness? Okay.
Yep.
Just double checking. Thank
Yep,
you.
that's fine.
If we can go back to 29, the first verse, it says, "It shall be a day of shofar sounding for you." My question is the holy conversation, is that the shofar sounding?
No, let's see. You're on chapter 29. What verse?
1.
Okay. On the first day of the 7th month, hold a sacred assembly, do no regular work. It is a day for you to sound the trumpets. That's what Yom Teruah. Teruah means trumpet.
Well, my version, Strong Torah, says it shall be a day of shofar sounding for you.
Yeah, that's trumpets. Teruah. Yom Teruah is the day of trumpets. What would yours say, Joe? Sounding.
It shall be a day of shofar sounding for you.
Shofar sounding. Okay, shofars are trumpets. You use your teruah on Yom Teruah. That's a teruah. I just, this, again, why numbers is called numbers. Here we go. Let's see, I think I had, my, it died on me somehow or another. No, I want you, can you go back and put the slide on there again? I thought I had the pictures, or I had the holidays broken down in terms of what they remembered and what they foreshadowed. Well, let me try it and see if I can get down there again without. Calendar. Now, what happens when I do this? It ends. Okay. Okay, I didn't put the slide in here I wanted to put. Oh, I don't have it on there. It's the one that talks about each of the 7 feasts, what it was supposed to memorialize and what it prefigured. You probably know half of this stuff. Pesach. What does Pesach memorialize? Well, Passover. The day the angel of death passed over the Israelites and they left Egypt. That's what Passover. What does it prefigure? What is it? What's the rehearsal for? Big pardon? Well, no. I thought it was Yeshua. Yeshua coming, right? And then the nice thing about it, one of the reasons that I kind of like how can I put it, the way we've interpreted the Feast of First Fruits that occurs during that week of unleavened bread is because it always falls on a Sunday. Right? And what happened on the Sunday during the week during the week of unleavened bread when Yeshua was crucified? He rose. Okay. Shavuot. Shavuot's another good one. What does Shavuot memorialize? Giving of the law. It typically memorializes when Moses came down with the 10 Commandments. What does it prefigure? Yeah, the Acts chapter 2, right? That's what it prefigures. That was the day, though, the Spirit came down on them in the upper room and all that kind of stuff. So the nice thing about that is you can see where the first 4 feasts both memorialized something and prefigured something and, forecast, prophesied something. The last 3, the church pretty much ignores, right? But the last 3 still memorialize things. As a matter of fact, the fun one is Sukkot. My gosh, it's this big, huge 8-day party, right? And what do you suppose that prefigures?
Millennial kingdom?
Yeah, certainly the wedding supper of the Lamb. It's, to me, the picture is too clear to be random. John,
I'm not sure the church studies much of the first part because that would require you to read all this stuff.
yeah, that's true. Any other thoughts about that? You guys, maybe you knew all that, but I wanted to go through and discuss it again anyway. Yeah,
I'm jumping way back
that's all right.
to the moon viewing.
Okay.
If you consider they lived in a desert area,
Yep.
there's no light pollution, and I'm sure everybody's been up north or somewhere where there's no light, and you look at the sky and it's just so inky black, and the stars are so bright. So from day to day, any changes in the moon would be quite evident.
Very noticeable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It'd be a lot easier for them back then when you step out of your tent and there's the sky
Yeah.
to see what's going on.
Yeah. And like I say, I don't think they were as fixated on being exactly right as we tend to be. So it is true that there are several places in the Bible where it kind of indicates that they were able to say, well, tomorrow will be the new moon. So they were able to predict it somehow. Now, maybe they predicted it a day off. I don't know. But it's not a big deal. It still makes this work. I'll just say it that way. The last thing I wanted to show you, just for the sake of completeness, is we have these 2 other feast days that we don't talk much about. Feast of Dedication, or Hanukkah, which occurs down here at the 24th for a week, 8 days, 24th of Kislev. And then the Feast of Esther, Purim, which occurs down here in the month of Adar. Now, a Feast of Dedication, that's not very even well known. Yeah, go ahead.
Am I correct in saying that the Hanukkah cannot be found anywhere in the Bible?
No, you're not correct. It talks about it actually in the New Testament. Yeshua was in Jerusalem during the Feast of Lights, Festival of Lights, which is what Hanukkah is. Yeah. Beg your pardon? Well, I was going to talk about that, but you guys haven't let me. Go ahead.
God had to put these things in order, or we would have been so confused that we wouldn't know which way was up or down.
Well,
So, but anyway, everything up there is exactly why he wanted it to be understood and to follow.
Yeah, that's true. The let me talk about these. The ones that are colored here are the 7 feasts that are described in Leviticus, right? To me, those are the ones that God is, most important to him. And what they have done is they have kept our understanding of him and our worship of him alive and somewhat consistent for 4,000 years. And they've helped us pass it down from generation to generation. When I look back at my childhood, what do I have memories of? Christmas, right? Well, most Jewish kids, of course, have remembrance of Passover and things like that. And those remembrances are the way this stuff gets passed down from generation to generation. It's useful sometimes to think of this from God's perspective. He's not in it for the short game. This needs to last for however much more longer it needs to last. And so he needs to somehow or another make sure his plan stays intact and that the people that are going to carry out his plan are at least aware enough of what's going on to be able to participate in a constructive fashion. Now, these last 2 holidays down here, do you know where Feast of Dedication or Hanukkah came from? That beg your pardon?
My understanding it was a delayed Sukkot. What are the question you're asking me?
Hanukkah. Where did Hanukkah come from?
Maccabees.
Maccabees. Okay, the Maccabees isn't even in the most Bibles, right? So it's a memorial. To me, it's much like 4th of July, right? God didn't say celebrate 4th of July. 4th of July is a memorial, okay? And the Feast of Purim is the same way. It's about the story of Esther, right? And the story of Esther occurred during the Persian reign. Persians were dominant in the Middle East. Neither one of those are of the same order, if you will, or magnitude as the 7 feasts that we talk about in Leviticus. Does that mean they're worthless? No. I mean, all traditions have their value. So there's nothing wrong with Hanukkah, and there's nothing wrong with Purim. It's just you don't necessarily need to consider them in the same way that you consider the other 7. I just wanted to say that because sometimes people get confused about all that. Hanukkah is the festival of lights. Yeah.
That was the rededication of the altar.
Yes, that's exactly right. Margaret?
Yes, I was going to say the feasts in the Torah, the first 5 books there, Leviticus and in Leviticus 23 and Numbers here, are Yahweh commanded.
Yes.
These are my feasts.
That's who he calls them. He calls them mine.
My feasts.
Yeah.
And so I know when you start keeping them, people will say, "Oh, I'm keeping your feast," and I said, "No, they're Yahweh's feast."
Yeah, he says they're his.
Whereas the Feast of the Dedication is it's a man-made historical memorial.
That's what it is.
Type feast, kind of like Veterans Day.
Yeah.
And in Israel, it's a national holiday.
Yeah, but it's
a national
like
holiday,
I say, it's like 4th of July.
Like 4th of July,
Yeah.
like Memorial Day, like Labor Day, like.
And it doesn't make it wrong, but it just
Right.
makes it of a much different ilk.
Well, it gives you pause to remember what went on.
Yeah.
Because there's stuff that went on there too, and there's also other, like the 9th of Av, where the temple was destroyed numerous times, and there's a lot of bad stuff that happened. That's a Remembrance Day where a lot of people keep it as a fast day. So there's those other days too.
It also prefigures the, as it says in Daniel, the desolation of abomination of desolation.
Yep.
Yeah. So
What does?
the Hanukkah,
Hanukkah. Okay.
because what was this, Antiochus?
Yep,
Antiochus Epiphanes. He
Yeah.
went in and sacrificed a pig
Sacrificed
on
a
the
pig.
altar.
Yep.
That's why they had to
Clean it.
clean it and rededicate the temple. But anyways, a few weeks ago, I went to this over here at Mesa. Just one day, they had a thing on Revelation, and they were doing this question and answer period. And somebody asked the question, And these were 7-day Adventists, so they observed the Shabbat. But somebody wrote in the question: do you have to? Do we still have to follow the feast days? And this preacher, he says, well, I got a one-word answer for you. I'm thinking, oh no, here we go. And he said, and that word isn't yes.
Oh,
I was like, oh boy.
oh boy. Well,
But anyways, he made this point that he said, well, if you do, then you would have to go to Jerusalem and observe these feast days. And I was thinking, well, you are required for 3 of them to go to Jerusalem, right?
if the temple's there.
If the temple's there, yeah, that's the thing. But there's no temple, so why would you go to Jerusalem? But I wanted to talk to the guy afterwards, but afterwards I just got up and left because he didn't seem like he would probably listen. But
No, I doubt that he was. I doubt you were going to bring him around to your way of thinking.
Yeah. Jenny and I left the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and Bradshaw was the Bradshaw was the speaker. And when
We're not supposed to use names like that on television,
I'm sorry, but he's a well-known pastor, and I'm not. But anyway,
Terry Brad.
that was one of the things when Jenny and I told Pastor Ray, Seventh-day Adventist Church, that we were leaving the church and going to Messianic Judaism. That was one of the things, because when I asked him about the replacement theology, he said, well, and then he was telling Jenny, well, the temple, are you going to start sacrificing animals again at the altar? And so, but anyway, this is to me, this was the false teaching of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I'm not ashamed to say it. It was totally wrong theologically and spiritually.
Okay. The way I look at this Torah stuff is you don't have to do any of this. You don't have to. But, the more you read about it and the more you get to know God, it kind of makes you want to. And Torah is always a want to. He doesn't want your grudging obedience. He wants your willing and heartfelt obedience. If you don't agree with it and you're not going to do it, fine. The curses are there too.
I was just going to comment that in keeping Yahweh's holy days, there is no temple.
Mm-hmm.
There is no temple. We can't all go to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And so that part of it, including the sacrifices that are talked about here in Numbers 28 and 29, we can't do that.
No.
Because we're not the priesthood either.
But there's a lot of stuff we can't.
But there's a lot of things that we can do, like the Sabbath. You can rest, you can surely rest, and you can surely hold a convocation, which are the 2 required things for the Sabbath. And then the new moon is pretty much just a celebration. So you do things to observe them.
Yeah.
Hold a special prayer time.
To remember them.
Yeah, to just acknowledge, Yahweh, we're trying to draw near to you.
Yeah, exactly.
As you commanded, even though we can't, and it's sad that we can't, and we're not in the land, and there's no temple, but that's how it is, and so we have to do the best we can.
I got to believe he's more pleased with us for trying to do something than to do Christmas. Anything else? Let's see. Cody has something. Wait. We're going to go here. I'm late. Ever.
Really fast.
Okay, good.
So one, I didn't know if someone said it, so I didn't say it then, but I'll just tie it in, like the Shavuot being both when the law was given and the Holy Spirit, and just how intimate those two are together, and
Good
how
point.
much we need that. And then therefore, the law being written on our heart by the Spirit, and then the words spoken from our mouth from Isaiah is through the Spirit, and those are so intimately involved.
Yep.
And then I'm not sure. I agree. I think it's a big warning on the idea that he wants us. This might be more important than we even realize in terms of if there's 5 virgins that were told no, and they had oil and they were virgins and they were waiting and they were there, then what is the thing that makes it so we're prepared?
Mhm.
Like, what is it that distinguishes us from getting the same thing reprimand? Those 5 virgins got the same reprimand as those who were healing the sick, raising the dead, casting out demons. So, and all throughout every book says that we're to obey the commandments
Yep.
and that they're not to be a burden. But that's
right.
all testimony that we actually have the Holy Spirit. And so then it becomes maybe much more serious than,
That's a fair point.
the influence we have over
Good point.
the.
I appreciate that. Okay. Kenny, did you have something you wanted to say? Well, is it quick or do you have a long one? Okay, we'll go.
It was just going with what you were saying, because the heaven that Torah is that light.
Yep.
And it's also told that scripturally that we're not to sell it. And so when it was telling the 5 unwise ones to go to those that sell it, essentially they would be going to potentially a corrupt congregation to sell it or buy it, however they were taught, and they would be unprepared because they didn't keep it. They obviously didn't stock up on his word
Let's-
internally.
You guys can do that afterwards. I need to quit. Okay. That's all right. I just feel like I don't like to go over because I feel like it's not respectful. So let me close in prayer. Father God, thank you for the discussion we've had. Thank you for the obvious impact it's had on us in terms of our thinking. And I'd ask that you'd help us to go kind of work these things through in our mind this coming week. And if we need to be changed, help us to change. In any case, we know you love us and we know you are pleased that we're trying to figure out exactly how your word applies to us and what we need to be doing. I just thank you for the privilege of being able to do this. And I ask that you make sure that anything I'm doing that's wrong or in error, that you just help people understand that. Forgive me. And just keep us safe until we meet together next week. In Yeshua's name, amen. Thank you. And we'll do it again next week.